Imagine this. You're standing in a grand, ancient library. The shelves stretch beyond sight, cathedrals of thought, carved not in stone but in centuries of human searching. Names echo through the air: Nietzsche, Sartre, Camus, Foucault, Russell. Giants of modern philosophy. You reach for their books, expecting answers, clarity, wisdom. But as you read, something unexpected happens. The words feel hollow. Brilliantly phrased, yes. Razor sharp, yes. But empty. Like finely carved tombstones in a graveyard of meaning. You walk deeper, searching for a voice that understands your questions, your longing for purpose, your ache for something beyond this cold rationalism. Instead, you hear whispers of nihilism. Echoes of despair. Pages that tell you consciousness is an accident, morality is a construct, beauty is chemical illusion, and your suffering is just neurons firing in the void. You close the book. And you wonder, how did we get here? Try to see this, a generation raised on progress, science, and reason, armed with the language of critical theory, post-structuralism, and materialism, yet increasingly plagued by depression, identity collapse, existential anxiety, and suicidal despair. They were told they were free, liberated from the chains of tradition, religion, and superstition. But freedom without direction is just drifting. And meaning without a foundation is just make-believe. We are now witnessing the slow death of a worldview. Not because it's being attacked from the outside, but because it is collapsing from within. Like a beautifully constructed building with no cornerstone. Modern philosophy has tried to build a house without a foundation. It has tried to talk about ethics without eternal good. It has tried to speak of meaning without an author. It has tried to explain consciousness without a soul. It has tried to understand the universe without God. And in doing so, it has reduced life to nothing more than atoms, time, and chance. But what if this entire edifice, brilliant, proud, and persuasive, was built on a silent lie? What if the death of God in the minds of modern thinkers was not a liberation, but a slow philosophical suicide? Think about this. If there is no God, then nothing ultimately matters. Not your pain, not your joy, not your love, not your losses, not your values, not your longing for justice. You can try to assign meaning, but deep down, you know you're just pretending. As Dostoevsky once said, if God does not exist, everything is permitted. And what happens when a civilization begins to live like that? What happens when the compass breaks and we call it freedom? What happens when the soul is reduced to software, and morality is reduced to preference? What happens when we treat human beings as programmable meat, culture as entertainment, truth as power, and God as a myth? Here's the tension. We are spiritual creatures who crave transcendence, but we've told ourselves for generations that nothing transcends. We want love that is eternal, but we say nothing lasts. We want to live lives that matter, but we say nothing ultimately does. We are hungry for something we claim doesn't exist. Is it any wonder we're lost? We look to modern philosophy, expecting it to guide us home. But instead, we find it pointing in all directions, and none at all. We look for the light, but we're told the light is a social construct. We search for identity, but we're told we are only what we invent. We long for justice, but we're told justice is just the will of the strong. No wonder we are tired. No wonder we are angry. No wonder we are anxious, despite all our intelligence and innovation. Modern philosophy, brilliant though it may be, has amputated the very limb it needs to walk, the divine. And now it limps in circles, trying to explain a world it no longer understands. So here is the great question. Can a civilization think clearly, feel deeply, and live meaningfully, without God? Or is the very act of asking, why, a whisper of his voice already echoing in us? This isn't about religion versus reason. It's about whether reason itself still has roots. Let's go deeper, into the hidden problem that no one dares name. Close your eyes and trace it back. Trace the thread from your doubts, your confusion, your existential fatigue, trace it all the way back to the source. Not to a political movement or a cultural shift, but to something deeper, a fracture in the soul of modern thought. We inherited a world where the sky was emptied of God, but we were still told to search for meaning. A world where the body was called sacred only in theory, but in practice was reduced to biological machinery. A world where truth was declared relative, but you were still condemned if you claimed the wrong one. Think about that contradiction. Picture a child told that there is no truth, but punished when he lies. Told he is free, but shamed when he chooses poorly. Told he is merely an animal, but judged for not behaving like a god. This is the secret schizophrenia of our age. So where did it begin? The problem runs deep, and it's not merely philosophical, it is profoundly psychological. When the Enlightenment began to elevate reason above revelation, it promised a new golden age. But something crucial was severed, the relationship between the mind and the soul. Rationalism dethroned faith. Empiricism replaced trust. The sacred was placed under the microscope, and declared an illusion. And God became a hypothesis to be tested, not a person to be known. The results were predictable. Augustine, the great doctor of the soul, warned that the heart is restless until it rests in God. He knew that philosophy without worship becomes dry speculation. That the intellect, unaided by grace, could never reach what it truly longs for. But modern man ignored him. Modern man tried to become his own God. Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." A brilliant insight, but one that quietly shifted the foundation from being to thinking. No longer was your existence grounded in a creator, it was grounded in your cognition. And thus began the long drift from personhood to process. Nietzsche, more honest than most, proclaimed the death of God, and predicted that with it would come the death of truth, morality, and meaning. He was not celebrating it. He was mourning it. What were we doing when we unchained the earth from its sun? He asked. He foresaw the psychic cost. When you remove God, you remove the center of gravity. And everything begins to spin. Pascal saw it too. He warned that man is a thinking reed, fragile and finite, yet capable of eternity. Without God, we are lost in grandeur and misery. In fact, he claimed the greatest tragedy of man is not his suffering, but his attempt to distract himself from it without confronting its cause. And still, we didn't listen. We kept building systems, ideologies, and social theories, hoping to create a new Eden by logic alone. But the soul was not built for mere logic. It was built for love, for transcendence, for a reality beyond itself. Kierkegaard, often called the father of existentialism, warned that the modern man was in despair not because he suffered, but because he no longer knew who he was. The sickness unto death, he said, was to be unaware that you are a soul made for God. And this is where the psychological dimension pierces the philosophical. Carl Jung, trained in the clinical trenches of the mind, saw it plainly: the Western soul was spiritually starved. The God-shaped hole, he believed, was real, and when it was not filled with truth, it would be filled with chaos. He didn't say this as a theologian, but as a psychologist. He saw the symbols of the divine in the dreams, traumas, and neuroses of his patients. Paul Tournier, a Christian psychiatrist, wrote that man's deepest problems are not technical, they are moral and spiritual. You can treat symptoms, but without a transcendent center, healing remains incomplete. And here lies the hidden problem. Modern philosophy doesn't just reject God. It forgets what it means to be human. In rejecting a creator, it has unintentionally rejected the very creature it sought to understand. Man is no longer seen as a being made in the image of God, but as a statistical anomaly. A machine with desires. A bag of chemicals with aspirations. And this view, this flattening of the soul, is not neutral. It creates wounds. When we lose God, we do not become free, we become untethered. We try to replace him with politics, pleasure, or personal brands. We seek therapy for our pain, but we cannot name its source. We deconstruct our beliefs, only to find we've demolished the ground beneath our feet. And perhaps worst of all, we silence the ache. We pathologize it. We numb it. We laugh it off. But still, the ache remains. Because it is telling us something. Something we were never meant to forget. Try to see this. You wake up in a world where nothing is true unless it can be measured. Not love. Not beauty. Not dignity. Not hope. Everything must pass the test of utility or vanish into irrelevance. But when the soul cries out, what machine can measure its scream? This is where we are now. A culture saturated in information, but starving for wisdom. A people fluent in data, but illiterate in meaning. The unseen consequence of modern philosophy's divorce from God is not just theoretical, it's existential. We were told we could be gods. Masters of our fate. Rational architects of utopia. But instead, we become anxious architects of illusion. We build digital selves to hide our shattered inner worlds. We flood our minds with distraction to avoid hearing the whisper of emptiness. We perform strength while silently unraveling inside. And this didn't happen by accident. When modern philosophy killed God, it thought it could keep the fruits of faith, human rights, moral clarity, the sacredness of life, without the root. But severed from the vine, the fruit withers. We see it now in the quiet tragedies that unfold each day. A young adult, crushed beneath the weight of infinite choice, unable to form a stable identity, haunted by a question he can't voice: who am I if there's no one to tell me why I exist? A woman scrolling through curated lives on her phone, comparing herself to illusions, sensing that nothing is real, even her own reflection. A man who's achieved success, status, and wealth, but who stares at the ceiling at night, sick with the question, why does it all feel so hollow? These are not isolated pathologies. These are symptoms of a civilizational illness, dislocation from the sacred. Because once you remove God from the equation, the human person becomes undefined. Once you remove the eternal, morality becomes a matter of fashion. Once you remove the soul, suffering becomes meaningless, and so we do everything to avoid it, even if that means numbing ourselves into oblivion. This is the emotional cost of secular thought, and it is devastating. Cognitive psychology confirms it. The brain is wired for narrative, for purpose, for teleology. We are meaning-seeking creatures. When denied meaning, the psyche compensates, through addiction, aggression, distraction, depression. Even the most rigorous neuroscience cannot explain why you grieve, or why you love, or why you weep at beauty. There are patterns, yes. But there is always something more, something deeper, something sacred. And yet modern philosophy insists, you are just a coincidence of chemistry. That your longing for justice is inherited tribal instinct. That your conscience is social programming. That your cry for God is the evolutionary residue of fear. But your heart knows better. Your heart knows that justice is not just strategy, it is sacred. Your soul knows that love is not a chemical, it is a covenant. Your mind knows that truth is not subjective, it is something you discover, not invent. And yet, because we are immersed in a culture built on the architecture of unbelief, we start to doubt what we know. We gaslight our own souls. We begin to wonder if our longing for transcendence is delusion. This is the tragedy of our time. We are experiencing spiritual starvation in a world of ideological abundance. We have philosophies for everything: identity, economics, ethics, education. But none of them can explain why we feel so hollow, why the modern soul walks in museums of thought but feels increasingly haunted by the silence of the eternal. As C.S. Lewis once warned, we make men without chests and expect from them virtue and enterprise. We strip away the soul and then wonder why our youth are lost. We teach them they are cosmic accidents and wonder why they feel anxious. We tell them truth is fluid and wonder why they drown in confusion. And still, the soul whispers. There must be more. There must be meaning. There must be something, or someone, beyond the veil. So we try to construct mini-gods. We worship the self. We worship progress. We worship ideology. But they cannot bear the weight. They crack beneath the pressure. Because we were made to worship something eternal, unchanging, immovable. And here's the final unseen consequence. When we lose God, we don't just lose morality or meaning. We lose the very mirror that tells us who we are. We look into the void, hoping it will tell us our name. But the void does not speak. Only God speaks identity into being. Picture this. You're walking through a fog-covered city at midnight. The buildings tower above you, made of glass and light, dazzling but cold. Everyone around you moves quickly, faces down, voices silenced by glowing screens. You look up, and for the first time, you notice there are no stars. The sky is empty. Manufactured light has buried the heavens. But then, a power outage. Silence. Darkness. Stillness. You look up again, and you see them. Stars. Infinite. Unchanging. Burning silently with a glory too ancient to be captured in code or commentary. This is the moment of rebellion. Not the rebellion of anger, but of awakening. Not a riot of noise, but a revolt of clarity. You realize, the world has not become darker. We just stopped looking up. The way forward begins with remembering. Remembering that we are not gods, and that's a mercy. Remembering that you are not your productivity, your profile, your preferences. Remembering that you were made, intentionally, fearfully, and wonderfully, by a mind that knows you, loves you, and calls you home. This is the rebellion modern philosophy cannot comprehend, the act of kneeling. The humility to confess that the answers are not found in more analysis, but in alignment. Not in self-creation, but in recreation. It begins by seeing through the illusion of self-sufficiency. Soren Kierkegaard spoke of the leap of faith, not as irrational escape, but as the only way to restore your full humanity in the face of existential despair. The rational mind alone cannot carry the weight of being. But faith doesn't cancel reason, it completes it. You were not meant to carry the cosmos on your shoulders. That job is taken. The rebellion deepens when you reject the lie that your value must be earned. G.K. Chesterton wrote that modernity is full of the virtues gone mad. Courage severed from truth. Tolerance cut loose from goodness. Humility divorced from reverence. The result is confusion masquerading as progress. The return to sanity begins with worship. Not blind submission, but awakened vision. Not superstition, but the deep harmony between faith and reason. Thomas Aquinas taught that reason is a gift from God, not a rival to him. To seek truth is to seek God, whether you know it or not. And here's the paradox that sets you free. Only by anchoring your life in something eternal can you truly be yourself. John Calvin wrote that, true wisdom consists in knowing God and knowing yourself. The modern world tried to reverse that equation. But the soul cannot define itself, it can only discover itself in the eyes of the one who made it. This isn't just theology. It's spiritual therapy. As David Benner, a Christian psychologist, observed, we cannot attain true self-knowledge without encountering God. Why? Because every identity apart from Him is ultimately reactive, based on wounds, fears, projections, or performances. But identity in Christ is revealed, not constructed. It is a gift, not a project. That's how you break free. You stop performing and start receiving. You stop searching for your truth and start aligning with the truth. You stop asking, who do I want to be, and begin asking, who was I created to be? This is not regression. It is revolution. To rebel against a world gone mad, you must return to sanity. To reclaim your humanity, you must rediscover your maker. Blaise Pascal said, "There is a God-shaped vacuum in the heart of every person, and it can never be filled by any created thing." You can chase pleasure, power, knowledge, or even philosophy, but unless it leads you to the source, it will betray you in the end. So what does this rebellion look like in practice? It's choosing silence over noise, so you can hear the whisper of the eternal. It's reading the scriptures not just as moral guidance, but as revelation of your origin, purpose, and destiny. It's resisting the cultural current that says truth is fluid and courageously planting your life on solid ground. It's looking at suffering and still believing that love is stronger than death. It's being intellectually honest enough to admit that a universe without God cannot explain you, not the ache in your soul, not the wonder in your heart, not the transcendent clarity that flashes into your mind when you see goodness, beauty, and truth converge. You were not made for nothing. You were made for someone. And in the end, the most powerful rebellion is not to become a god, but to become fully, beautifully, fearfully human, made in the image of God. Visualize this. A child, lost in the ruins of a great cathedral. The stained glass is shattered. The altar is cold. Dust covers the marble floors where saints once knelt in reverence. He wanders through the sacred wreckage, calling out, but no one answers. He doesn't know the names etched in the stones, or the stories behind the carvings, or the songs that once echoed in the arches. But still, something in him stirs. A sense that this place was once alive. A whisper that he belongs to a story far greater than himself. That child is modern man. Haunted by what we've forgotten. Thirsty for a glory we no longer name. Hungry for the sacred in a world that has forgotten how to kneel. And here is the final, most powerful realization. Modern philosophy is not wrong because it questions. It is wrong because it forgets. It forgets that reason has limits. That knowledge without wisdom is blind. That language without truth is manipulation. That the mind, magnificent though it is not the center of the universe. The true center is not an idea. It's not a principle. It's not even a philosophy. It is a person. The Logos. The Divine Word. Jesus Christ, the wisdom of God made flesh. This is not metaphor. This is the very truth modern philosophy has spent centuries avoiding. That ultimate reality is not an abstraction, but an incarnation. Not an argument, but a presence. In him, the eternal entered time. The author stepped into the story. The infinite made himself knowable. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. Not an idea. Not a proposition. Life. Light. Truth. Person. That is the cornerstone modern philosophy lacks. That is the reason its house keeps collapsing. Because all the brilliance in the world cannot answer the ache in the soul. You do not need another theory. You need an encounter with the one who said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." That is the paradigm shift. The shattering of illusions. The pulling back of the curtain. The realization that your hunger for meaning, your longing for justice, your thirst for love, your ache for permanence, they are not illusions. They are echoes. Echoes of Eden. You were made for communion with God. And without him, every philosophy is just a shadow play on the wall of a cave. You might describe the shadows with great precision. You might even argue about them endlessly. But until you turn around, until you walk into the light, you remain a prisoner. Jesus doesn't merely answer your questions. He redefines the questions. He doesn't just give you meaning. He is your meaning. He doesn't just show you the truth. He is the truth. And he doesn't just help you live. He is life itself. This is what the greatest Christian thinkers have known for centuries. Anselm saw faith as the lens through which reason becomes clear. Leibniz understood the necessity of a perfect being to explain anything at all. Maritain knew that without a transcendent ground, even beauty becomes profane. Alvin Plantinga proved that belief in God is not only rational, it is the very foundation of rationality. All roads that seek truth, when walked honestly, lead to him. But only if you have the courage to see. Because here's the final paradox. The freedom you've been told to chase, freedom from God, from truth, from limits, is not freedom at all. It's just another form of bondage. Real freedom is found in surrender. Real clarity is found in humility. Real power is found in weakness that looks up and says, I am not enough, but you are. That is the death of modern philosophy's pride, and the resurrection of eternal wisdom. So now the fog clears. The stars reappear. And you finally see what was always true. You are not an accident. You are not a machine. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a soul. A soul made in the image of a God who is not silent. And until you return to Him, no philosophy, no matter how sophisticated, can tell you who you really are. But with Him, the universe unfolds with meaning. Your suffering becomes a story. Your joy becomes sacred. Your questions find a home. Not because all mystery vanishes, but because mystery itself becomes beautiful again. So, think again. Is philosophy truly alive, if it has no God? Or is it merely echoing in empty halls, awaiting the voice that once made it sing? The choice is yours. Look up. Kneel down. Remember who you are. Because in the end, the deepest truths are not found in human minds, but in the heart of the one who made you. Thank you for reflecting with me today. If this video meant something to you, consider liking and subscribing, and until next time, stay curious.